Good morning to everyone. As we won't be having a shiur next week, so we have a lot of material to cover. We have to cover Yitzchak and Hanukkah today. I also like to dedicate the shiur in the memory of Mrs. Esther Cohen, very involved in organizing Shiurim, Tanya Shiurim. There was a time that she held a Tanya shiur in her house every Sunday, and she organized it here in the Family Center. I believe she organized the Shiurim, and should be a good to better for her family, and should be only good things by you. Tomorrow night is Yitzchak. It's the art site of the Mezritcher Maggid, the disciple and successor of the Baal Shem Tov, and the teacher and mentor of the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, whose book we're studying. It's also the festival of liberation of the Alter Rebbe, who was imprisoned 126 years ago, 226 years ago, excuse me, under the Tsarist Russia, and was imprisoned for 53 days, corresponding to the 53 chapters of Tanya. And on Yutas Kislev, the 19th of Kislev, which is tomorrow night, Friday, he was liberated. And this is considered the Rosh Hashanah for Chassidus, when a new phase of Yafutzu, Ma'anesecha Chutza, the spreading of the wellsprings of the Baal Shem Tov outward, began. The Alter Rebbe writes in a letter, shortly after he was liberated from prison, he writes a letter to his colleague, Rabbi Yitzchak Barditchev, and he writes in the letter that when I was reading Tehillim, and I read the pasuk, Pada v'shalom nafshi, my soul was redeemed in peace. Before I began the next pasuk, Yatsasi v'shalom meHashem shalom, I came out in peace from Hashem. So he mentions that pasuk says, Pada v'shalom nafshi, my soul was redeemed in peace. And when I read this pasuk, Pada v'shalom, Yatsasi v'shalom, I went out in peace from Hashem. So there seems to be an emphasis here, not only on the fact that he was redeemed, liberated, but also the fact that the liberation took place in a manner of peace. What's the emphasis, or why is it so important that the liberation took place in a manner of peace? Well, let's just first explain it on a very simple level. You have someone in prison, so there's two ways to liberate them. If someone is in prison, someone is incarcerated, someone is kidnapped, being held, there's two ways to liberate them. One way to liberate them is to send in a military force to liberate them. That's called liberation in a state of war, battle. Then you have that the same people that imprisoned him realized that the right thing to do and the correct thing to do and the proper thing to do is to liberate him. Then it's a liberation in peace. The same force that imprisoned him liberated. Why is that so significant? Because the Alter Rebbe was imprisoned for disseminating the teachings of Chassidus. And we learned in Tanya, especially we learned the title page of Tanya not long ago, and about the long and short way. And the emphasis, the uniqueness of the teachings of Chassidus is that it teaches us how to deal with the challenges in life, not necessarily by fighting the challenges, but by enlightening our own animal soul and the negative forces within ourselves, sharing with them the beauty of Yiddishkeit, sharing with them Hashem, that taste and you will see that Hashem is good, godliness is good. So instead of it having to be a continuous battle, it's a transformation of the negative energies within ourselves and within the world around us, so that they themselves should recognize the beauty of Yiddishkeit and the beauty of godliness, the beauty of faith and mitzvahs. So it's a redemption in peace. Being that the Alter Rebbe was incarcerated for his disseminating of teachings of Chassidus, and his liberation was a license from on high to take the dissemination of teachings of Chassidus to a new level. So the liberation itself took place in a manner of peace, where the same forces that incarcerated him, the same forces that imprisoned him, liberated him. Because this is what Chassidus does. It enlightens us in such a manner that we should realize that it's actually this it's desirable. It's desirable to be a yid. It's desirable to study Torah. It's desirable to fulfill this. It's the greatest privilege in the world. Not something you have to fight with yourself, with the part of yourself that wants a good life. Say, no, I'm not going to let you have a good life. You'll have to do what Hashem wants you to do, not what you want. That would be liberation through battle. Liberation through peace is realizing that what you really want to do is what Hashem wants you to do. The greatest privilege in the world is to serve Him. So this goes along with the theme of Qadr Shalom, of liberation and peace. Moving on from Yutas Kislev, next week we have Hanukkah. And of course, Hanukkah is celebrated for 8 days. The reason we celebrate Hanukkah for 8 days is because they found a jug of oil that was only enough to last for 1 day. And miraculously, it lasted for 8 days. So there's the famous question that's asked by the Vayeishev. If that's the case, the sensible thing would have been to celebrate 7 days. Because if they had a jug of oil that naturally could have provided could have fueled the flame of the menorah for 1 day, and it ended up burning for 8 days. So then 8 minus 1 is 7. So the miracle lasted for 7 days. It had enough oil to last for 1 day. It lasted for 8 days. That means 7 extra days. So surely we should celebrate 7 days, not 8 days. And there are many answers given to this question. The Vayeishev himself gives 2 answers. One answer he gives is that what possibly happened is that since they knew it was going to take 8 days until they got pure oil, so they would have to use this 1 jug of oil to light the menorah for 8 days. So they divided the jug into 8 parts. And each day they filled the menorah only with 1/8 of the jug. And the miracle was that it lasted a whole day. And if that's the case, the miracle happened for 8 days. Because each one of the 8 days, they only put in enough oil to last for 1/8 of the night. Lasted a whole night. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that they filled the menorah with they filled the entire menorah with the oil from the jug. When they finished filling the menorah, they saw that the jug was full again. So even though they didn't benefit from the miracle the first night, because the first night they had enough oil, but they saw the miracle the first night. They saw that immediately after they filled the menorah, the jug was full again and ready to be used again for tomorrow. So the first night we also celebrate the first day because they recognized the miracle right away. So generally speaking, this is the 2 ways that he explains it. Or he says, or they filled the menorah with the jug and emptied the jug into the menorah. And the menorah burnt all night, and in the morning it was refilled. It was miraculously full again. So essentially, there's 2 approaches of the Vayeishev. Whether the miracle was that it lasted 8 times longer than it should, or the miracle was that it refilled itself. The difference is, what was the miracle? Was the miracle in the quality of the oil, or was the miracle in the quantity of the oil? According to the first interpretation, there was enough oil to last only for 1/8 of the night, and it lasted all night. So that means that you didn't end up getting more oil than you had naturally. You had the same amount of oil. Quantity was the same, but the potency of the oil, the quality of the oil was transformed. Instead of just being strong enough to make the flame burn for 1.5 hours, let's say, it made it burn a whole night. So the miracle wasn't the transformation of the potency of the oil, quality of the oil. According to the second interpretation, that the jug or the lamps miraculously refilled themselves, then the miracle was in the quantity of the oil. That miraculously they ended up with 8 times as much oil as they had originally. Now, let's look first at the first explanation, that the quality of the oil was transformed. So if we look at this explanation that the quality of the oil was transformed, you only put in enough to last for 1 hour, 1.5 hours, and it lasted. So if that's the case, we have two questions. One from a historic perspective, and one from a halachic perspective. The question from a historic perspective is something that you can ask a simple question. This event, that the oil, the potency of the oil was transformed, and instead of lasting for an hour and a half, let's say, it lasted for a whole night. Has such a miracle happened before in Jewish history? And the answer has to be yes. We just spoke about it a few weeks ago. Sarah Imeinu lit Shabbos licht every week. And her Shabbos licht, she probably put in enough oil for them to last until after the Sukkah, a few hours. And miraculously, it lasted until the next Friday. And the same miracle repeated itself every week. And then when Rivka came along, again, the miracle repeated itself. Again, every week, throughout the life of Rivka. So for so many times in the life of Sarah and the life of Rivka, such a miracle happened, that the potency of the oil was transformed. And instead of it being able to cause the flame to burn for a few hours, the flame was able to burn a whole week. So true, the miracle of Hanukkah happened not just to one individual, what happened to Klal Yisrael, it happened in the Beis Hamikdash, and it was seen by many people. But at the end of the day, it's a repeat performance of what happened already. So why would the sages have made a full festival and make an institution that we should light candles 8 nights for something which is only a repeat performance or something that happened before in our history? Not such a big deal. Sure. So what you're saying is, in other words, an answer which is brought by many of the commentators, that the first day we celebrate the fact that they found the oil. So the 7 days we celebrate the miracle that the oil lasted longer. The first day we celebrate the fact they found the oil. But that's not what the Vayeishev says. The Vayeishev says the reason we celebrate 8 days is because perhaps they divided the oil into 8 parts, and every day it was a miracle that it lasted for 8 times as long as it should. Okay, so if the potency of the oil changed, and the question is, it's a repeat performance of the story of Sarah and Rivka. That's a historic question, from a historical perspective. Then there's another question from halachic perspective. And that is, there's a halacha. And when you fill the menorah, the Beis Hamikdash, you have to put in enough measurement that it should burn from evening to morning. So when it came the first night, their obligation was to fill the menorah with enough oil to last the whole night. So how could they allow themselves to divide it into 8 parts and not put the full measure into the menorah? They weren't halachically fulfilling the mitzvah any night, because you have to put in enough oil for it to last the whole night. And especially bearing in mind that there's an opinion that says that in a public situation, you don't have Shem and Tahir, you can use Shem and Tahir. So if they only had Shem and Tahir, pure oil, for one night, they should have used that oil for one night. And the next night, they'll light with impure oil. And they'll at least have fulfilled the mitzvah correctly. What gave them the right to divide it into 8 parts and not fulfill the mitzvah correctly even one time? Now, if we look at the second explanation of the Vayeishev, that it was a transformation of the quantity of the, not the quality. In other words, the oil expanded, it became 8 times as much. Then both these questions are answered. Because the miracle is not in any way similar to the miracle that happened by Sarah and Rivka. By Sarah and Rivka, there was no additional oil. By Sarah and Rivka, the potency of the oil changed. But there wasn't any quantity of oil. There wasn't a new quantity of oil. So here, the miracle of Hanukkah, according to the second interpretation, is a totally different kind of miracle. Also, the question that we asked, if there isn't enough oil, you have to fill the menorah with enough oil. According to the second interpretation, they filled the menorah to the full. However, there's another question on the second interpretation, also from a historical perspective, and from a halachic perspective. From a historical perspective, the question is, it's not a repeat performance of the miracle of Sarah and Rivka, but it is a repeat performance of another miracle. We all remember the story only a few weeks ago, Parshas Vayeishev. We read the haftarah of the story with Elisha, the wife of Avadia. The wife of Avadia came to Elisha after Avadia passed away, and she said, my husband passed away, he left a lot of debt because he borrowed money from Achav to feed the prophets that Achav was trying to anyway, and he didn't pay up the debts. And now Achav came along and wants the debt repaid, and she has no money to repay it. So Achav suggested that he was going to take her two sons as slaves, and they will work until they repay their father's debt. And she wasn't very happy about that, so she came crying to Elisha, help. So Elisha said to her, what do you have in the house? He said, I have only one small jug of oil. So he said to her, borrow empty vessels from all your neighbors, many as you can get your hands on. Then close the door of your house. Only you and your sons should be in the house. You should pour from the small jug of oil into the empty vessels. And that's what she did. And the small jug of oil miraculously filled all the empty vessels. And as each vessel was full, the children moved to the side and they brought in another vessel, and the other vessel was filled. And she had a house full of full vessels of oil. And she came to Elisha. She said, what do I do now? Elisha told her, go and sell the oil, pay your debts, and with the remainder, you'll be able to live. According to one interpretation, till Tchias HaMetzah. Have enough there to last you till Tchias HaMetzah. So what happened in that miracle? That miracle, the quantity of the oil was much more than 8 times as much. So we already had such a miracle that the quantity of the oil was multiplied. So why do we make such a big deal out of the miracle of Hanukkah if the miracle was that the quantity of the oil was multiplied? We've had that before. The repeat performance of the story of Elisha. So yes, it's a great miracle. It happened in the Beis Hamikdash, and it happened for all of Klal Yisrael. Very nice, but at the end of the day, it's still a repeat performance of something that happened already before. Yeah, okay, so, but in the essence, the miracle is basically the same. That a little bit of oil became a lot of it. The second, and then we have another question from a halachic perspective. And that is that you're supposed to light the menorah, according to the Torah. You're supposed to light the menorah with olive oil. Shaman Zayazah, right? So the oil that was originally in the jug was olive oil. But when the jug refilled itself, or when the lamps of the menorah refilled themselves, that wasn't olive oil, that was miracle oil. It wasn't oil that came from an olive, it's oil that came from a miracle. Can you light the menorah and fulfill the mitzvah with oil that's miracle oil rather than olive oil? Or does it have to be olive oil? I understand, but if it didn't come from an olive, it came from a miracle. So the question, you have to really, you would have to say, it's a little bit difficult, a little bit tight squeeze, but you'd have to say that the meaning of olive oil in the Torah is not oil that's squeezed from olives, but oil that has the same property as olive oil. So if you took it to a laboratory, they tested it, they examined it, they told you, yes, it has all the properties of olive oil, then it's good enough. But it's not actually olive oil. So it's still questionable. Could they really have fulfilled the mitzvah properly with oil that wasn't olive oil? Okay, so again, whichever way we slice the pie, whether we say it was the quality that changed or the quantity that changed, we still have a problem from a historic perspective and from a halachic. So there's actually another way of understanding the story of the miracle of Tanya, which answers all the questions. What is this other way? Other ways like this. The miracle wasn't with the oil, not the quantity of the oil, not the quality of the oil. The miracle was with the flame. The flame of the menorah needs to be burning from the consumption of the oil. So obviously the flame, as long as it was burning off the consumption of the oil. However, we know that heavenly fire doesn't consume, like the story in the burning bush. The burning bush was burning with fire, but it wasn't being consumed. Heavenly fire doesn't consume. But over here, it needed to be consuming in order for the fire to be fulfillment of the mitzvah. It had to be the fulfillment of the mitzvah, has to be with flame. It's coming off the consumption of the oil. So the suggestion is that the miracle over here was the simultaneous event of two opposites simultaneously. The flame was coming off the combustion of the oil. And at the same time, it wasn't consuming the oil. it was one miracle of two opposites simultaneously. The flame was coming off the consumption of the oil, which is the natural thing. But at the same time, heavenly fire doesn't consume. So it wasn't consuming the oil. It was consuming the oil, and it wasn't consuming it simultaneously. Now, how can two opposites happen simultaneously? And this explains how the oil was there for the next day, because it wasn't consumed. And it remained olive oil, because the original olive oil was still there. The flame was not consuming the oil. Now, how can two opposites happen simultaneously? It is consuming the oil and it isn't consuming the oil. So we know this from the story that the Gemara says in Yuma about the Beis Hamikdash, that the Aron, the ark in the Beis Hamikdash, did not take up any space in the Kodesh HaKadosh. We've spoken about this before. So if you measured from the wall of the Kodesh HaKadosh to the Aron, it was 10 amos. You measured from the other wall of the Kodesh HaKadosh to the Aron, it was another 10 amos. You measured the Aron itself, was 2.5 amos. You measured from one wall to the other, was 20 amos. So 20 plus 10 plus 10 plus 2.5 equals 20. Now, it doesn't make any sense. Now, what's most phenomenal about this is that we know that there are certain things that take up space. Physical things take up space. There are certain things that don't take up space. Ideas don't take up space. Concepts don't take up space. Angels don't take up space. Souls don't take up space. But physical things take up space. So to have something that takes up space, we can deal with. To have something that doesn't take up space, we can also deal with. But something that has a measurement of 2.5 ounces and at the same time does not take up any space doesn't make any sense. But that's the uniqueness of this miracle, that it was what we call nimna hanimna. It's the impossible of impossible. I always illustrate it with a very, very simple illustration. Very simple example, just so we should understand clearly what we're talking about. If I ask a question, can the Almighty make an elephant go through the eye of a needle? But I will say, of course, nobody can do anything. He's omnipotent, right? But ask yourself, what did you mean when you said of course? Did you mean that the elephant can shrink and fit right through the eye of the needle? Or did you mean that the eye of the needle can expand so big that the elephant can walk right through without having to take a deep breath? Or did you mean that the elephant will remain an elephant, not shrink at all? The eye of the needle will remain an eye of a needle, not expand at all. And nevertheless, the elephant will walk right through the eye of the needle. That's impossible. But is anything impossible for the Almighty? So the idea is that he can do two opposites simultaneously. And that was the uniqueness of the miracle of Hanukkah, that two opposites happened simultaneously. The flame was burning off the consumption of the oil, and the oil was not being consumed. And therefore, it's not a repeat performance of the miracle of Sarah. It's not a repeat performance of the miracle of Elisha. It had nothing to do with it. And the question that we asked, don't you have to fill up the menorah full in order to fulfill the mitzvah properly? The menorah was filled full. Question asked, don't you have to use olive oil? It was olive oil. It was the original oil from the olives. Everything was perfect. And now we can understand why the sages made such an incredible festival out of it. Because this is an incredible event. Unprecedented.
But we've always learned that miracle which is the oil.
Yes, but what happened to the oil?
But no one's going to talk about it.
Now, what happened to the oil? That the oil was causing the flame to burn, and at the same time not being consumed. So it wasn't the oil changed in quality. It wasn't that the oil changed in quantity. It was the miracle that at the same time that the oil was being consumed, it was not being consumed. And therefore, the oil was still there the next day for them to light again. Okay, so according to this interpretation, as it would be, okay, so the question was, what about the last day? Repeat the question. So according to this interpretation, as well as it would be according to the Vayeishev's interpretation, that there was the refilling of the jug or of the lamps. So the last day they benefited from the miracle, although the miracle didn't repeat itself again. So the fact that the lamp was still burning on the last day, last night, was because of the miracle. At the end of the 8th day, there was no more oil left. They didn't need it anymore because the next day they already had pure oil to light with. But the 8th day, they were able to light the menorah on the 8th day because they still had the oil as a result of the miracle. They weren't refilling every day, they were relighting every day, according to this interpretation. Yes. I don't know if they had to refill it. If the menorah was full, they could light the menorah the way it was. So the question, did the jug fill up? So one of the Vayeishev himself says two possibilities. Either the jug was refilled or the lamps of the menorah were refilled. But so the assumption that we have when we speak about the lamps of the menorah being refilled is that they emptied out and then they miraculously refilled. This perspective can also be put into the words of the Vayeishev. But here it's not being refilled, it's that it never unfilled itself to begin with. Never emptied itself because it wasn't being consumed. Now, what is the difference between these three approaches? So the difference in the three approaches is very interesting. According to the understanding that the potency of the oil change, when did the miracle happen? The miracle happened at the very beginning. There was one miracle happened at the very beginning that the potency of the oil was transformed. Once that miracle happened, 8 days, everything went smoothly because the oil now was transformed oil that can cause flames to burn 8 times longer than it was before. So even though the miracle was visible for 8 days, but the actual miracle happened only once at the very beginning. So if you watched it burn, you saw that you were dealing here with a miracle because it was burning much more slowly than it burns naturally. The oil was being consumed much more slowly than it does naturally, but the actual miracle, the transformation of the oil into a different level of potency happened only once. If you say that the miracle was in the quantity of the oil, then when did the miracle happen? Once a day, right? Either when the jug refilled itself or when the lamps refilled itself. And the rest of the day, because you had the miracle at the beginning of the night, whatever it is, so it was burning naturally as a result of the miracle that happened at the onset. If you take the third approach, when did the miracle happen? If you take the third approach, that the miracle was that the flame was burning off the consumption of the oil, but the oil was not being consumed. So the miracle was ongoing, was happening every second. Right? Now, bearing that in mind, what is nature and what is miracle in our Avodas Hashem, our service of Hashem? So we know that nature in Avodas Hashem, the service of Hashem, so when we serve Hashem in accordance with our nature, every person has their nature. And we serve Hashem in accordance with our nature, whatever fits our nature, whatever fits into our comfort zone, whatever we're good at. Those are the things we do to serve Hashem. What about if we're called upon to do something which is not within our nature? We're called upon to do something which is outside of our comfort zone, which is going to take going against our natural tendencies. Then you need some kind of miraculous effort within yourself to transform yourself. Not so simple, not so easy. That's called performing a miracle. Outside of nature, you have to be supernatural in your approach. You have to use what we call Mesiras Nefesh, or what we call Kabbalah Soil, acceptance of the yoke of heaven. This is what God wants. We're going to make it happen one way or another, whether it fits into our nature or it doesn't fit into our nature, whether it's within our comfort zone or outside of our comfort zone. It's going to have to happen because this is what Hashem wants. That's called Mesiras Nefesh and Kabbalah Soil. And then there is natural service of Hashem. Teva is getting on with what fits my nature, what within my comfort zone, and what I'm good at. There's a famous story about a group of students that once came to the Rebbe. A group of college students came to the Rebbe. They thought they were interviewing him, sure exactly what, and they came. And the first question they asked the Rebbe, is it true that the Rebbe performs miracles? And they heard that the Rebbe performs miracles. Isn't true. The Rebbe said to them that every Jew has a part of God within him, and Shama, which is a part of God, and Shama within the Jew is supernatural. So it's not, miracles are not completely out of the, anyway, and then they discussed other matters. End of the Yechidus, the Rebbe said to them that at some point you asked me about miracles. So I think would be a good idea, since we're all here together, we should perform a miracle together. I'll perform a miracle here together with you. Everybody got very excited. The Rebbe explained to them that nature, in Avodas Hashem, is to do things in accordance within your comfort zone. And the miracle in Avodas Hashem is to go beyond your nature, beyond your comfort. So I want everybody to stop for a moment and think about their Yiddishkeit at the level that they're comfortable with. Yiddishkeit within their comfort zone that they are practicing at the moment. And to make a resolution to go one step beyond your comfort zone. That'll be the miracle that we'll all make together. Right? So that's what a miracle is. A miracle is to go into the supernatural realm. And as opposed to nature, where you're just doing what you're comfortable with. So when we talk about a Jew experiencing the Mesiras Nefesh, Kabbalah Soil, it could be done in a number of ways. One way it could be done is get up in the morning. It says, Meidani l'fanecha, Almighty, I'm yours. You can count on me. I'm not going to let you down, no matter what. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hashem is our God. Hashem is one. I'm ready to give myself up completely for the Almighty. And at that moment, he's really with the program all the way. And then you get on with your day. And during the day, of course, you're under the influence of that initial commitment of the Mesiras Nefesh that you experience when you said Shema Yisrael. But at the end of the day, you're going through a natural day. You're serving Hashem in accordance with your nature. Influenced somewhat by the Shema Yisrael, but it's not noticeable in the way you conduct yourself. That's one possibility. Another possibility is that a person gets up in the morning and says Shema Yisrael with such a fervor that it leaves a recognizable impact on the entire day. At every moment of the day, you can see that this is a Jew who got up this morning and said Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, with all his heart and soul. But at the end of the day, the Shema Yisrael was only in the morning. And the rest of the day, you can see the effect of it, but it's within the realm of nature. Then there's a third possibility. Third possibility is that a Jew is living with Mesiras Nefesh and Kabbalah Soil, with self-sacrifice and acceptance of the yoke of heaven, full force. Like when you say Shema Yisrael, every moment of the day. So the lights of Chanukah, there's an expression in Yiddish, we have to listen what the lights are telling. Sit Chanukah, and we light Chanukah, we sit by the candles half an hour and watch the candles. We listen to their message. We listen to the message of the candles. So the question is, what is the message of the candles? So according to the three interpretations that we gave about the miracle of Chanukah, that dictates what the message of the candles is. The miracle is Mesiras Nefesh. Miracle is Kabbalah Soil, going beyond your comfort zone, beyond your nature, right? Nature is to stay within your comfort zone. Do the things you're good at, do the things you're comfortable. So there's three possibilities. One possibility is that the Chanukah lights empower you to start your day every day with a dose of Mesiras Nefesh. Ma Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu. But then when you get on with it, it was a miracle. It happened once in the morning, but that's the end of it. The rest of the day flows naturally. Then you can have a situation, the Chanukah lights empower you to go a step further. You have such an experience of Ma Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad that it's noticeable throughout the day that this is a person who actually experienced the devotion and the dedication to Ma Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, and therefore it's somewhat noticeable in the way that he serves Hashem. Then you have a situation where the Chanukah lights empower you, like the story of the Chashmonaim, who had literally had Mesiras Nefesh to fulfill the Almighty's agenda. Yiddishkeit was in jeopardy, and they didn't consider whether it was safe for them or it wasn't safe for them. Within their nature, not within their nature, within their comfort zone, not within their comfort zone, they put their lives on the line to have Mesiras Nefesh to save Yiddishkeit. And they went all the way. So they achieved this great miracle, came from Hashem in reciprocation for their Mesiras Nefesh. And therefore, it empowers us every year when we commemorate the miracle by lighting the Chanukah list and observing the Chanukah list. We are inspired and empowered to become miracle people. to become a Siddur Nefesh people, Kabbalah Sale people, not just once a day, but then every moment of our lives we should be permeated with a passionate dedication and devotion to Hashem that transcends all limitations. There's no such thing as I'm not comfortable with this. There's no such thing as I'm not good at that. There's no such thing as it's not within my nature. It's Hanukkah. And Hanukkah goes above and beyond. It's Bayam and also Nisim Lavi Sebu Bayam Mahim Bisman Azad, the Almighty miracles for our forefathers in those days. And the point of the miracles that happened in those days is that it should inspire us and empower us in these days. That we should live a life, a miraculous life, a life of true dedication beyond, above and beyond all the norms, above and beyond nature, above and beyond the comfort zone, and to do it with joy and enthusiasm. To know how privileged we are to be so connected with Hashem. And in this way, we will merit before Hanukkah, that before Yom Kislev, to have the ultimate miracle of coming in Mashiach, in gathering the exiles, the building of the Beis Mikdash Shlishi. We will see the menorah in its original state once again, and to sein lichtig by you.
Amen.
Now we're going to move over to Tanya. Sure. Of course. No thing to be sorry about. Ask is a thing. Okay, the question was, let me repeat it to the people on the Zoom. The question was, what is the difference? I'll repeat it to the people here as well. What is the difference between the miracle of the burning bush, where the fire was burning and the bush was not being consumed, and the miracle of the oil, Hanukkah, the way we just explained it, we said was incredibly phenomenal? The answer is very simple. By the burning bush, there's no halacha that the flame has to come from the consumption of the bush. So it was a heavenly fire, and heavenly fire doesn't consume. End of story. So the bush was there, the fire was burning, and the fire wasn't consuming the bush. That's a miracle, but it's not an impossibility of impossibility. It's not the impossible of impossible. It's just, this is the way heavenly things work. They don't consume. Here, if it didn't consume, it wouldn't be the fulfillment of the mitzvah, because the mitzvah has to be a flame coming from the consumption of the oil. So here, there had to be consumption of the oil, and at the same time, there had to be no consumption of it. And that's what's so unique and so awesome about this miracle, is that it was two opposites simultaneously. That's like the case of the Urim, which takes up space, yet doesn't take up space. Okay, so the question was, what about Kosis Lamoyer? How does that tie into the concept? Kosis Lamoyer, it says that in the Beis Hamikdash, in order to have oil with which to light the menorah, they had to crush the olive. So I could say that is about the light of the Beis Hamikdash. Now we're talking about Hanukkah. However, you asked the question, and I think it's a valid question, so I'll just point that Kosis means, to crush it means that you don't insist that you should remain exactly in the shape and form that you are. You're prepared to be crushed as long as you're fulfilling the mission. So this is the idea of being ready for Mesiras Nefesh. That probably the connection. Okay. When in Tanya,
Sorry.
yeah, please.
It's really a question I have.
You can ask as many times as you want.
You don't have to explain. But, would you say it was a double miracle? Say,
It was one miracle, which was the fusing of opposites. Consumption and non-consumption simultaneously.
one.
It was one miracle, which was the fusing of opposites. So, okay, so the question was, when you saw the flame burning, and according to this explanation, you saw every moment, you saw something phenomenal happening. You saw that there's oil over here, there's a flame. The flame is coming from the oil, and the oil is not being diminished. So every second, the miracle is repeating itself in the most phenomenal way. So that inspires us and empowers us that we should be able to create a miracle in our attitude to Yiddishkeit that should be ongoing. It's interesting that Rabbi Akiva, you all know the story of Rabbi Akiva when he was in his last day of his life, when his flesh was being combed with iron combs. He said, Shema Yisrael, v'haftas Hashem Elokecha. Talmidim asked him, can you really feel that way at this moment when you're going through what you're going through? Really feel this The Makiva said, what do you mean? Every day of my life, it pained me that I was saying words. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levav, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meidecha. Love Hashem with all your heart, with all your soul, which means even ready to give up your life. And I wasn't putting my money where my mouth is. I was saying words. Now I have the opportunity to actually live up to what I was committing myself to my whole life. This is the greatest moment of my life. So the expression over there is Kol Yomai Hayisi Mitzdayer Masa Yavin Yavin Akanim. All my days. It doesn't say every day. It says all of the day. Kol Yom, the entire day. It wasn't just when the moment that I said Shema, I felt this inspiration of Mesiras Nefesh, and then I got on with other things. The entire day I was permeated with inspiration of these things. Okay, we're going to move on to Tanya. If I remember correctly, we're in the middle of the approbations of the Haskamas, which are on page 4 in the numbers on top of the page. I don't know what the number is on the bottom of the page. 14 and 15 in Roman numerals. Okay. So on the left column, we have the Haskama of Rabbi Leib HaKoyin. Right? The Haskama of Rabbi Zusha Anapol in the right column we learned. And we're now ready to do the left column, which is the Haskama of Rabbi Leib HaKoyin. So Haskama and Avachasid Avafursum Ishaliki Kadeshi Amar Leib. This is the Haskama of the well-known, pious, godly man, that the word holy is appropriate to describe him, Yehuda Leib HaKoyin. And he writes as follows: Chachmas Adam Toyer Pnei Haaretz. The wisdom of man illuminates the face of the earth. Bir'oisi Yedei Kodesh, as I see, and it's obvious here that the words Yedei Kodesh mean as if though it was written. You have the place now? Page looks like this, where you have two columns. Okay, so it says here, "B'Oisi Yedei Kodesh," which literally means I see the holy hands. It means I see the holy handwriting. I see the Kisvei Yedei Kodesh, the writing of the holy writings. So the wisdom of man illuminates the face of the earth as I see the holy writings of Hamachaber Rabbi Ishalakim, the author, the genius, the godly man, Kadosh V'Tar, holy and pure, Chassid V'Anav, pious and humble. Now, you'll notice in this Haskama that some of the words are written in Ashi letters, and some of the words are written in square letters. There is significance to this, and it's quite deep significance. But we're first going to go through it, ignoring that difference, so we get it on a very superficial level. Then we'll look back at it and see how what is alluded to in the different fonts that are used there. Asher mikvar nigla mistara, his secret has already become known. In other words, it's already the author of this book is already well known as a great scholar. Vayeishev b'shebes tachkameini eitzel adireinu mereinu v'rabeinu ge'in elam. He sat in accumulated wisdom at the feet of our master, teacher, and rabbi, genius of the world. Reference to the Maggid of Mizrich, because Rabbi Yehuda Leib HaKoyin was a disciple of the Maggid of Mizrich, as was the Alter Rebbe. So he's basically saying that this author of this book, which is going to be published without a name, you should know that this author is a very holy man. And he was with me at the feet of the Maggid of Mizrich. The Dala Mayim, and he fetched water referring to the waters of Torah, Mib'er Mayim Chayim, from the fountain of living water. So he's basically telling you that you can trust the author of this book. What he writes is coming from a holy source. He's a very devout disciple of the Maggid of Mizrich, and you can rely on him. U'ka'eis Yismach Yisrael. Now Israel, referring simply speaking to the people of Israel, should rejoice. The Gala is Divrei Kadshe, in the revelation of his holy word. I'm a chuber that have been brought together, Lahavi Lebeis HaKus, to bring to print, L'lamed L'am Hashem Darkei Kodesh, to teach the nation of Hashem the holy ways, Kasher Kol Echad Yechse, the Pnimius Dvarav, as everyone can see inside his words. Looking inside his words, you'll be able to see Yeah, this is incredible, incredible things over here that have been, the ways of Hashem have been brought here to print, to teach the nation of Hashem the holy way. Now, before we go any further, I'm just going to go back a little bit and point out that there's a number of lines here that are in, as I said before, in square words, square letters. Which are the letters that are in square words? You have the words HaMechaber HaRavago, the author, that refers to the Alter Rebbe. Then you have a few lines further, you have in square letters, Adeneinu, Meneinu, V'Rabbeinu, Ge'ein Olam. That is a reference to the Maggid of Mizrich, right? Then it says, the Dolam Mayim Mi Be'er Mayim Chayim, that he fetched waters from the fountain of living waters. And the words Mi Be'er Mayim Chayim are again in square letters. Why are these words Mi Be'er Mayim Chayim in square letters? So we know that when the Alter Rebbe originally arrived in Mizrich, so the Mizricher Maggid paired him up as a study partner, as a chavrusa, with the Mizricher Maggid's son, who was known as Rabbi Avram Hamal. He's a very, very spiritual man. He was known as Rabbi Avram, the angel. Because he was angelic, he was very spiritual. And he was very well versed in Kabbalah and in Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe was a genius in Talmudic studies. So the Mizricher Maggid paired them up as study partners. Part of the time, the Alter Rebbe should teach him Talmud, and part of the time he should teach the Alter Rebbe Nister, the esoteric part of faith. And there are many stories associated with this partnership that took place between the Alter Rebbe and Avraham Hamal. One of the stories that's very interesting is that they started learning the Gemara from the beginning. The first Mishnah starts, "May Emas Aikayin Shema." From literally means from when can you read the Shema? So the Alter Rebbe was the teacher, and the Malach was the student. The Alter Rebbe said, "Me'emas Aikayin Shema." From when on? From what time can you read the Shema in the evening? So the Avraham Malach said, "Really? That's what it means." I always thought Me'emasai means Be'ema Ubiyira, with awe and trepidation. When you read the Shema, the word Me'emasai can mean from when? It can mean Me'emasai from the word Be'ema Ubiyira, with awe and trepidation. When you read the Shema, you know you're reading the holy words, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. That should be in a state of awe and trepidation. You can see that he was on a completely different wavelength. And the Alter Rebbe, and he said, the Maggid set out for them a schedule of how many hours they should be learning the exoteric part of Torah and how many hours they should learn the esoteric. So when they learned the exoteric, the Alter Rebbe was the teacher, the Malach was the student. And when they learned the esoteric, the Malach was the teacher, and the Alter Rebbe was the student. The Alter Rebbe later said that he used to fiddle with the clock to extend the time of learning, when the Malach should teach him Hasidus, because he enjoyed so much studying from the Malach, the esoteric part of Torah, that he would play with the clock to extend the time of their study sessions. And he said that Mayim Genuvim Yimitaku, the pasuk says stolen waters are sweeter. That which he learned during that stolen time, he had a special appreciation. Stealing time from him. Yeah. Anyway, I don't have answers to all the questions, but the story is a great story. So as a result of this, the Alter Rebbe, in a sense, studied, besides studying under the Maggid, he was also influenced by the teachings of the Malach's son, Rabbi Avram HaMalach. So Rabbi Yehuda Leib, who was a colleague of both of them, student of the Maggid, wanted in his approbation of Tanya to mention, at least allude to, this Rabbi Avram HaMalach. So he wrote, "Dola mayim mi be'er mayim chayim," that the Alter Rebbe fetched water from the well of living waters. The word mi be'er is the letters Avram. See that the word mi be'er is the letters Avram. So he's alluding to the fact that besides the fact that the Alter Rebbe was a disciple of the Maggid of Mizrich, he also fetched waters from the well of living waters, referring to Rabbi Avram HaMalach. And that's why those words are also in square letters. But it's a reference to another individual who is in the equation. And then he says, the Ka'es Yismach Yisrael, which the superficial meaning of it is now Israel should rejoice, meaning the people of Israel. But there's a deeper meaning of it. And the deeper meaning is that Yisrael is the name of the founder of Chassidus, the Baal Shem Tov. So Ka'es Yishmach Yisrael, now Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov should rejoice. V'higolos divrei kadshay, when his holy words have become revealed. In other words, this is the first opportunity for someone who wants to find out about the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov to find a printed book where he can open it up and read and be inspired and have his eyes illuminated by the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. Ka'es Yishmach Yisrael, here the Baal Shem Tov will now rejoice that there's an opportunity for his teachings to be disseminated in such a manner that hitherto did not exist. So the word Yisrael is in square because it's a reference to Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. And this reminds me of a story that happened in connection with this Yisrael. It says that the Baal Shem Tov and the Maggid, who were both already passed on in the world of truth, came to visit the Alter Rebbe in prison. Came from the other world to visit the Alter Rebbe in prison. And the Alter Rebbe asked them, why am I here? Why do I deserve this? And they told the Alter Rebbe, because you're disseminating the secrets of Torah. And he said that if that's the case, when I leave here, if I'm liberated, should I stop disseminating the secrets of Torah? They said, no, now that you've started, you should continue with greater strength and greater good. In other words, when you'll be liberated, that'll be a sign that you received the license from heaven to disseminate it even with greater strength and greater good. And the Alter Rebbe said to them, you should intervene on my behalf. After all, I'm teaching only your teachings. So the Baal Shem Tov said to them, how do I know that what he's teaching is actually authentic to what I taught you? So the Mezritcher Maggid suggested that the Alter Rebbe should say a Maimer. He should say a Hasidic discourse in the presence of the Mezritcher Maggid and the Matem. And the Alter Rebbe did. He said a Maimer beginning with the words Mareim u'Maseyim, which is printed in Torah. And the Baal Shem Tov said, Emes Torah. This is true Torah. This is exactly the way you, referring to the Maggid, heard it from me. So what the Alter Rebbe taught is the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. So Ka'es Yismach Yisrael, now Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov will rejoice v'higolos divrei kadshay, when his holy words have become revealed to teach the nation of Hashem how to serve Hashem properly, the holy words. So that's why all these specific words that we passed that are written in square is because they're referring to various tzaddikim that are significant in this equation: the Alter Rebbe, the Maggid, the Avram HaMalach, and then the Baal. Then he goes on to say, that which is public knowledge doesn't need any proof. So why is my approbation required here? It's just so obvious that this is an incredible piece of work. It doesn't need me to approve of it. So why am I doing this? Because of the copyright issue, because there's a concern that nobody should come along and cause damage to the publishers by publishing this book and undercutting the publishers. So Basi Litin Pekav Azhara, I've come to give a strong warning, that no one should dare lift a hand or a foot. Litfais to print this book, Meshacham Shanim, Litfais ad Meshacham Shanim, until 5 years from the date below. So this is the basic copyright issue, that 5 years after this book is published, no one should, without permission from the publishers, dare to reprint the book and undercut the publisher. Whoever hearkens to my words will be blessed with good. This is the words of the one who speaks this for the honor of Torah. Today is Tuesday, third day of the week, as I mentioned in the previous Haskama. Third day of the week is the day when Ki Toiv is doubly mentioned in the Chumash. It says that Hashem created the world every day in the first 6 days of creation. Every day it says, Hashem saw that it was good. And on the third day of the week, it says twice Ki Toiv. So today is the third day of the week in which Ki Toiv is mentioned twice. Parshas Vayeishev. So if you remember, we discussed in a previous year, Parshas Vayeishev, the idea of Kisavay el Haaretz, to come to the land of Israel, which spiritually speaking is Aretz, has to do with the will of Hashem. To perform the will of Hashem enthusiastically. So Kisavay el Haaretz spiritually means to enter into the land of Israel in the spiritual sense, which means to enter into a strong, passionate commitment to living by the ways of the Torah. So he testified that this Sefer is the ideal method to achieve entering into Eretz Yisrael. Beruchnius, This is the sefer, this is the passport to be able to enter into Eretz Yisrael in this sense of the word. And then he says, Tav Kuf Nun Vav. What's Tav Kuf Nun Vav? Tav Kuf Nun Vav literally is the year 556. Without cotton, without 1,000. That means the year 5,550, which is the year when this approbation was written, just a few months before the publishing of Tanya in 5,557. However, you remember when we began this discussion about these approbations, I pointed out that the initial reaction of Reb Zusha when he received Tanya was that with this paper, you didn't go to preach. And he alluded it to at the end of his approbation. And the initial reaction of Rabbi Yehuda Leib HaKohen when he saw the manuscripts of the Tanya, where there's that this sefer will be the Torah, the incense, to protect us from, or to the antidote to all the magefis ruchni, the spiritual plagues of Ikvus of the Mashiach. Just before the coming of Mashiach, there'll be spiritual plagues. And just like a plague, the Chumash we know, Moshe told Aaron to take the Torah and stop the angel of death and block the plague, stop, cause the plague to stop. Similarly, the spiritual plagues that will be just before Mashiach will also need a Torah ruchni, a spiritual incense, to stop those spiritual plagues. And he said that the Tanya will be the spiritual incense that will stop the spiritual plagues. So the antidote to all the spiritual plagues that are roaming around before the coming of Mashiach is the Tanya. And this he alluded to in the words Tav Kuf Nun Vav, which is Rosh Hashanah's Tanya Teres Neshama V'Ruach. Tanya is the Keteris for the soul and the spirit. Signed Yehuda Leib HaKohen. Of course. So there it's the names of the publishers. The Duseinu is the significance that we spoke about that. The redemption that was his initial reaction. That that this is the sefer with the church will be free. But here it's fascinating because it goes through the various generations, like the Alter Rebbe and then the Maggid and the Malach and the Mishal Hashem. So even though it can all be understood by ignoring the different fonts, but when you understand that the font, that the fact that those words are written in unique font has a special meaning to it, the whole approbation takes on a meaning. So I'll take this opportunity to wish everyone a Shana Teva, B'limud Chassidus, the Darkei Chassidus, written and described for a good year in the study of Chassidus, the ways of Chassidus, and the ultimate purpose of Chassidus, the Yechutza minus Echutza, is to bring Mashiach, the name is to help him, that should be a Geula, Amitis, Vashlema, taken from Yad Mamish, Yitzchak Kislev, and Hanukkah should be celebrated with great simcha. Yerushalayim and Arkadesh, and Mashiach Sekenu B'Yisrael.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you.
We don't say Tachna Mayutis. In fact, there's a beautiful letter from the Rebbe. We put the Sichis,
I'm able to see whom have sent it
the office of Yitzchak Kislev, where the Rebbe addresses the question somebody asks about a certain shul. They didn't say Tachna, and they were upset when other people said Tachna. And the Rebbe defends it very, very strongly and explains that not saying Tachna Yitzchak Kislev is confirming that what the Alter Rebbe was Moshe Nefesh for is something which is a simcha for God's Klal Yisrael, that the Alter Rebbe was victorious in being able to disseminate teaching Chassidus. It's a part of Torah like every other part of Torah, and very strong about this minhag of Siddim that we don't say Tachna. So in Chabad we actually say Tachna on your side. There are other Chassidim that don't say Tachna on the outside. Some of them don't say Tachna in the system because it's the Chabad of the outside. Also true. But even in Chabad, when we do say Tachna on the outside, we don't say Tachna in the system because it's the Yom Tov of the Alter Rebbe's liberation. Of course you can. Yes. Actually, there's a pasuk in this week's Sedra which says, "Vayeishev hurad Mitzrayim." Yosef was taken down to Egypt. The Medrash says the word hurad also comes from the root radabahem. He took control. Yosef coming to Egypt took control over Egypt. Ultimately, he became the viceroy of Egypt. And it's interesting that the Alter Rebbe while he was in prison, there were various things that took place where he was 100% in control. We go through all the stories, but on this way already in the black carriage, he came Shabbos, Friday noontime, he asked the general to stop for Shabbos. When the general refused, the axle broke, the horse dropped dead, and whatever they tried to do to pull the wagon to replace it and fix it didn't work. And eventually they had to just stay there until the end of Shabbos. Shabbos, everything sorted itself out. And similarly to the story when taking Alfred Rebbe across the river by boat, but through interrogation, and he saw the Levana, he saw the moon, he wanted to stop the boat. It's also a miraculous story over there. So the Alfred Rebbe, wherever he was just like this, that's all. Similarities. Yeah. So the next year will be in 3 weeks' time. That's our session. And we'll skip 2 weeks. We'll skip the 2 Wednesdays of Erev Chanukah and towards the end of Chanukah, those 2 Wednesdays skipping, so everybody can focus on their Hanukkah licht, and especially now that we know the deeper meaning of it. And Mir Hashem, in 3 weeks' time, we'll continue.